Hello, everyone. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. All right. Thank you for being here. Welcome, those of you who may be new. Welcome to the Threefold Lotus Kuon Sangha. And congratulations and thank you for being curious and wanting to practice correctly the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, specifically Lotus method, with the advice and mentorship of our modern day Bodhisattva Nichiren. Yeah. So, first, an omission from last video that somebody asked a question that didn't really make sense, but it made sense when I considered that I left a critical component out of the description of GoHonzon in the Buddhism reference. I don't know how I left it out, but I added it in. You know, as I said, this is a first draft, so this exercise of reading through it with you is actually quite an important component of reading through this draft and finding either errors or omissions like this one. And that omission is the explicit definition from Nichiren, our mentor, that GoHonzon is not this scroll, this mandala. And he repeats it in several letters, but specifically, and the quote that I used came from the real aspect of GoHonzon. Could that be any clearer? And the quote is, and I'm ad-libbing here, but and you've heard this quote many times, never seek this GoHonzon outside your flesh and blood body. Because it is in this body where we emerge the mind, right? Our sentience, to conceive of, to open the Buddha eye in our minds. That is GoHonzon. He's very explicit about it. So please, there's still so many out there who want to push, but it could be both, or it could be this, or it could be... Stop thinking magic and mysticism and just listen to what our mentor says. He's absolutely clear on this point. That mandala is not GoHonzon, but the action that we take with our sentient minds to perceive Buddha-ness is itself GoHonzon. And you know what? I'll go a step further, because I want you to understand, what is the a priori law? What is the law of the engine of life? It's Myoho Renge Kyo. And when we invoke Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, what are we in fact doing? Are we not inserting the key, Namu, and starting the engine, Myoho Renge Kyo? Is that not GoHonzon? That is what the invocation of Buddha-ness is. It's the opening of the Buddha eye. It's the GoHonzon process. It's the transmigration. How many words do we have to use to talk about this mental shift, which Nichiren calls our highest objective of the practice, GoHonzon? So, why do I say this? Seems obvious, yeah? When you assist somebody in learning the invocation, are you not in fact handing them, availing them, nurturing them, assisting them to open their GoHonzon? What else is it? Here, say this after me. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Come to my house, we'll chant, and then we'll talk about it. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. They hear it. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. They hear GoHonzon. That is the GoHonzon. So all of this political rhetoric of authoritarian ownership that says, oh, don't give somebody a GoHonzon before they're ready, is completely opposite of what Shakyamuni taught and every bodhisattva after him taught. Certainly Nichiren. What is the first thing you do when you introduce somebody to this practice? You hand them a GoHonzon. You say, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Bunk. You've just handed them GoHonzon. Or the ability to manifest it, right? Never seek this GoHonzon outside your flesh and blood. It is your mind. This scroll is important. Don't get me wrong. The function of this scroll as a mandala, a focal tool, is incredibly helpful. Thank you, Nichiren. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. It encapsulates the entirety of Shakyamuni's teaching lifetime in one little place to distract our monkey mind, get it out of the way so we can enter our GoHonzon, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, and perceive, experience Buddha-ness. Yeah, the scroll is important, not minimizing it, but it is not GoHonzon. All right. I think I've hammered that point enough. Okay, now we come to Samsara. The three definitions I list at the top are the domain of the 10 worlds or 10 realms. Second is the sentient mind of collecting data for the purpose of identification. This creates an extreme reliance on possession of things as defining the self, or what physicists would call locality. And third, the mind of self-identification and ego. That may sound a lot like the second. I won't deny that. But it's a different way of understanding, right? What are the 10 worlds after all? All right, let me just read what's in here. It's hard for me to stay focused on, and obviously you can see this is why I don't script my videos, because the scripts drive me nuts. Okay, what I've written is, contrary to popular misinterpretations, Samsara is not a place or location. Samsara is not our day-to-day life. I've heard that a lot too. Samsara is the reality, quote unquote, that our sentient mind experiences as the collected data identified and constantly reevaluating as the possessions of knowledge. That's how we talk about it, right? This is knowledge that I have, when in fact we're constantly revising and reiterating it, that our brains have collected for the benefit of our self-identification. That's a little less obvious, yeah? I call this the warehouse of self, right? The warehouse of the data, the database. It is a complete fabrication existing and maintained solely for the purpose of our identification. It is constructed through our 8 consciousnesses to be discussed later, right? That's not a common day discussion. That's a Buddhist discussion. In the common parlance of, for a very long time now in human history, we talk about consciousness, unconsciousness, and there's not much else. Now, we can define that consciousness as consisting of several different things, and this is where Buddhism does this excellent job of dissecting terms for greater insight and understanding. And as you know, Buddhist dialogue on this is about 9 consciousnesses, which includes Buddhahood, Buddha-ness, right? Our experience of Buddha-ness is the 9th consciousness. But that 9th consciousness is greatly obfuscated by our constant identification of the physical realm. And I've done it again. I've gone off from the text, so let me get back to it. Sorry. Ironically, though we might think that this means we construct our identity solely on things, it is the very act or action of enumerating the database, the warehouse of things, that we are truly attached to as our primary activity. See, attachment is the activity. It's not the thing itself. We make that I'm doing it again, but attachment doesn't mean a suction cup to some kind of connection physically to a thing. It's a mental attachment, right? This is what Shakyamuni identified as craving. For more on this, see the seashell analogy. I have just a few analogies I've put at the end of this book, and I probably will find more in my history of video or podcast making to add. Right now, I think I only have 3, and I know I've come up with more than that. But I'll only add them to this reference manual if they're useful, right? Pertinent, more broadly used. To continue. Samsara is the actual act of data identification as opposed to the data itself. So even the data points, I like blue more than red. The points aren't the issue. Again, things, thingifying. But it's the act of recalling those attachments that is samsara. You see the differentiation there? It is tempting to say that things are the trouble with our samsaric mind. But actually, it is the very act of collecting, identifying, possessing via that data point, maintaining that data point, with the motivation to maintain it, to own it, to make it a part of who I am, that is the samsaric trap. It's important to understand this because this is the basis of understanding why life is seen in Buddhism as suffering, not because it's bad, but because the condition of life through a samsaric perception begets suffering. It can't be otherwise. This is what we're trying to transmigrate, trying to alter. In other words, not the thing itself, but the idea, the thought that has identified the thing as owned, mine, or known to one's self, right? Because if it is known, who is the knower? That's how we identify self. It's pretty sketchy when you break it down like that, right? The self is such a constructed, what you might call a straw man, or an identity. This act of knowing, quote unquote, in the samsaric mind is just as real, quote unquote, as the furniture in your home. The act is real, but it's not a thing. It's a commitment, right? The samsaric mind makes no distinction, though, between this apparent identification and the real. This is why people hold so vehemently to their opinions, because their opinions are just like a piece of furniture. No. Right? This is true. It's only true because you make it so. But don't, right? As though the opinion itself is something to be protected, defended, and prized as a possession. Because this opinion makes me. We're pretty clever, the mind, in doing this. But Buddhism says, do you see what you're doing? Do you really think that opinion is you? Or are you somebody with opinions that can easily shift without affecting who or what you are? Ooh. Last paragraph. So you could say that samsara is actually our constant state of cravings. Isn't that exactly what Shakyamuni pointed out? To escape or be liberated of cravings, then, Four Noble Truths, is to escape or to liberate ourselves from the mind of samsara. Not that we deny anything exists. The mind of samsara is a construction. So turn that off. Leave that room. Like escaping a dream state, we must awaken to the state of momentum. Everything exists. Everything's moving and changing. Nothing is static. Right? Concept of, I should put see emptiness here, but I didn't do that. Maybe I should. Make sense? Samsara is a mental condition that we build our whole idea of who we are around. And it's based on a database of stuff we own. And because our mind, our brain is constantly reiterating, right? Just like, I watched a video on Big Think, a great channel on YouTube, on trauma. And we think of trauma, the woman, this scholar goes on to say, as being in the body, right? Muscle memory, things like that. When you get into a car accident, or a dog bites you, or you have a really bad breakup, right? But it's not your body that remembers that stuff. Again, we thingify. It's our brain database, our warehouse that we're maintaining constantly. And our brain does this to protect our physical self, our mental self. Because once something negative, what she puts it in terms of metabolic price, because the brain, when it's really active or scared or whatever, when it's really engaged, uses a lot of energy, a lot of the body's resources in order to keep grinding away, right? So it's costly in that sense. And the brain wants to avoid that cost. So if a trauma, something we think of as trauma, is a costly process for the brain, talking totally samsarically here, this is the physical world, then the brain's going to alert us of anything similar, right? Because that's how it protects us. Oh, don't get into that again. Oh, that might happen here. Be careful, be cautious. And so the brain is constantly reiterating that trauma to make us aware of danger. But it's all constructed, right? It's just the database manager going, aisle 5, shelf 43, don't forget, right? We don't have to repeat whatever that trauma was, but we're constantly alerted to it. And it changes the way we behave because we own those thoughts, in this case, trauma. Same with everything. This is why life is suffering because the samsaric mind is constantly observing the warehouse manager for tripwires. Or even the trauma doesn't have to be negative. That's a judgment, a value judgment. It could be a high. Look at gamblers or addicts of any kind. They're looking for that high. So much so, they don't even pay attention to the downsides, let's call it. The self-damaging, Shut up. The high is worth it, right? It's all samsaric. This is cravings. But if you could like leave that room and close the door and walk outside into the hallway and keep walking outside of the house, outside of the database, outside of the warehouse. Wow, you hear that? The birds, the blue sky. Oh, the trees, the vegetation. Oh, look, little animals. That room with all the cravings, it doesn't affect you. You can look back on the warehouse. Oh, I know that room's in there. Wow. Don't need to do that. Look at all this. What do I call that? The warehouse analogy? I'm sure I have it somewhere. Anyway, right? Samsara, a constructed reality. You're saying, but Sylvain, isn't Buddha-ness also a constructed activity or place or something in the mind? Well, let me see what kind of clever analogy I can come up with that. We know when we build a house, we have lots of technologies to build a house now, but let's just be simple here. The old stick method, right? We need 2x4s, 2x6s, plywood, blah, 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 blah. And we know that those come from trees. We take the trees, we chop them down, we make lumber, we build a house, so on and so forth. But in the process of a planet and an ecosystem, we remove ourselves from that carpentry and we can see house building for what it is. We can see the effects on the entire organism, Gaia, of the planet. And the planet, if you want, far enough, of a solar system, which itself is part of, right? And you can just keep going. That doesn't take away house building, but it does incredibly change your perspective, doesn't it? And what Buddhism is saying about Buddha-ness isn't that you're constructing a new reality. What Buddha is saying is that that reality, that fundamental reality, has been there all along. You just weren't paying attention to it. And the one reason, the only reason to chase Buddha-ness, to practice, to instantiate that mind, that GoHonzon mind, to experience Buddha-ness, is to not be hammering your nails or your fingers with the claw hammer, to not be in the stressful situation anymore. Have a home, build a home, but perceive it, experience it through the amazingness of the entire process without attachment, without the constructed selfness of it. The cravings, right? The whole purpose of Buddhism is to live life fully, no denial, but free of the baggage, the stress, the anxiety, the manufactured anxiety about something not necessary, invented, right? That's what Buddhism is about. It's about this life and living it fully. Without restraint, without fear, without stress and anxiety. That's the ultimate goal. Every day our practice teaches our brain, our samsaric brain, how to open, leave that, look for GoHonzon in everything. Life becomes so much easier, so much more joy-filled, right? an expression and an experience of love, to use a hackneyed term, real love, without conditions, right? Okay, thank you for listening. It's another brief one, but I just wanted it. Samsara is a big term, and I wanted to redress the GoHonzon definition because I think it really needed that emphasis from Nichiren. Thank you for liking and subscribing. It really helps grow our Sangha. If you can, at some point, once I've gone through this draft, 1, 2, 3, I don't know how many drafts it'll take, but I'll publish this book. It'll be available as an ebook, as you have the other books on threefoldlotus.com, or print books on lulu.com. There are some ebooks there too. I'm still vacillating on that decision. But all of your support, whether you're purchasing books or even Cafe Press has some artwork and t-shirts and that kind of thing, but I'm not a big promoter of all that stuff. I just want to keep this resource growing and building and being useful for your practice. That's the whole thing. And patrons, whether you're on Patreon/TLK or PayPal, you guys are amazing. We all thank you for your support. Thank you for your practice. Take care of your health, right? So if you're not healthy, hard to practice. And be kind. First off to yourself. Take care of your health, right? And kindness always feels good. So do that, and I will see you in the next one. All right? Bye for now.